She stood in the middle of the party, smiling, while everyone laughed at her. Her own husband, Adrian Volkov, was the one humiliating her. But wait, what no one knew was this. The blind woman he mocked that night already knew his darkest secret, and she had been waiting for the perfect moment to expose it. Because what Adrian did to her years ago wasn't an accident, and what happened next destroyed everything. Mira Volkov woke up before the sun rose. She always did, not because she had somewhere to go, but because silence felt safer than people. Her fingers slowly moved across the edge of the bed, feeling the smooth fabric, confirming what she already knew. Adrian wasn't there. He rarely was. But she didn't know that this distance was not just emotional. It was intentional. Mira sat up carefully, her movements calm and practiced. Every step she took in that mansion was memorized. 7 steps forward. Turn left. 3 steps. Table. She never needed help. She never asked for it either. Because deep down, she had already learned something painful. Depending on people only leads to disappointment. Still, she smiled, because that was who she was. Soft, patient, quiet. The kind of woman who still said thank you, even when she was being ignored. But there was something she didn't know, or maybe something she refused to accept. Adrian Volkov was not the man she thought he was. The mansion was always cold in the morning, not physically, but emotionally. Staff moved around quietly. No one spoke to her unless necessary, not out of respect, but fear. Fear of Adrian. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of getting too close to her. Because everyone knew Mira Volkov was not just the boss's wife. She was a reminder, a mistake, a weakness. And in Adrian's world, weakness was dangerous. Later that morning, Mira sat by the window. She couldn't see the sunlight, but she could feel it. Warm, gentle, different from everything else in her life. She held a cup of tea in her hands. It had already gone cold. She didn't notice. Her mind was somewhere else. Back to a memory she never talked about. A night filled with confusion, pain, and darkness. But wait, that night was not what she believed it was. And the truth behind it had been hidden from her for years. Madam, a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Elena, the housemaid, the only one who spoke to her like she was human. There's an event tonight. Mira tilted her head slightly. An event? Yes, a business party. Sir requested your presence. Requested. Not invited. Not asked. Requested. Mira smiled softly. Of course. Because she always said yes, even when she wasn't wanted, even when she felt it. Upstairs, in a completely different part of the mansion, Adrian Volkov stood in front of a mirror. Perfect suit, sharp expression, cold eyes. He adjusted his cufflinks slowly. Precise, controlled. Everything about him screamed power. But there was something else too. Something darker. Something hidden. What happened next would slowly begin to reveal it. A man approached him carefully. Sir, are you sure you want her there tonight? Adrian didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at his reflection. Then smirked. Yes. A pause. Then, it's time people see. What I deal with. That one sentence carried more cruelty than anger, more intention than emotion. Back downstairs, Mira was getting ready. Her dress was simple, elegant, soft fabric, no heavy makeup, no loud accessories, just her, because she never tried to stand out. She only tried to belong. But she didn't know. Tonight was not about belonging. Tonight was about breaking her. As evening approached, the mansion slowly came alive. Cars arrived. Voices echoed. Luxury filled the air. But inside Mira, there was a quiet unease. Something didn't feel right. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it. And sometimes, feelings know the truth before the mind does. Adrian walked into the room. His presence alone changed the atmosphere. Heavy, sharp, dominating. Mira turned slightly toward him. You're here? Her voice was soft. Genuine. Adrian didn't respond. Not immediately. He just looked at her. Silent. Cold. Then finally, be ready in 5 minutes. No warmth. No emotion. Just instruction. As he walked away, Mira's smile faded slightly. Just for a moment. Then she fixed it again. Because that's what she always did. Hide the pain. Keep the peace. Pretend everything was okay. The car ride was quiet. Too quiet. Mira sat still. Hands gently folded. Adrian looked out the window. Uninterested. Disconnected. But inside his mind, something else was happening. Something calculated. Something planned. Tonight, he thought, everything begins. The venue was massive. Bright lights. Loud conversations. Powerful people. The kind of place where status mattered more than truth. Mira stepped out of the car slowly. Carefully. Adrian didn't help her. He never did. Inside, the room shifted. Eyes turned. Whispers started. Not because of Adrian, but because of her. The blind wife. That's her. Why is she here? Mira couldn't see their faces, but she could feel it. The judgment. The curiosity. The quiet mockery. Adrian leaned closer to someone. And then, he laughed. Not with her. At her. But wait, this moment was not just humiliation. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Something no one in that room expected. Mira stood there. Still smiling. Still calm. Still silent. But deep inside, something shifted. Something woke up. Not anger. Not yet. But awareness. Because somewhere, beneath her softness, was a truth. A truth she had been holding on to, without even realizing it. And, tonight, for the first time, that truth was about to come closer to the surface. The music was loud. Laughter echoed across the room. Glasses clinked. Conversations flowed. Everything looked perfect, but something was off. Mira stood beside Adrian. Quiet. Still. Smiling. But she didn't know. This was not just a party. This was a setup. Adrian. A man approached with a wide grin. Good to see you again. Adrian shook his hand firmly. Likewise. Then, the man's eyes shifted to Mira. A pause. A smirk. And this must be your wife. The tone said everything. Not respect. Not admiration. Something else. Something mocking. Mira nodded politely. Nice to meet you. Her voice was calm. Gentle. Unbothered. But Adrian chuckled lightly. Oh, she won't remember you. A small pause. Then he added. She doesn't see much anyway. Laughter. Soft at first. Then louder. Spreading. Like a ripple. Mira's fingers tightened slightly. Just for a second. Then relaxed. Because she was used to it. Or, at least, that's what she told herself. But wait. That wasn't the worst part. The man leaned closer. So, how do you manage? Adrian raised an eyebrow. Manage what? You know, he gestured subtly toward Mira. Adrian exhaled slowly. Then, with a careless tone, honestly, it's like living with a shadow. That line hit differently. Mira didn't react. Not outwardly. Her face stayed calm. Her posture steady. But inside, something cracked. Just a little. But she didn't know. This was only the beginning. Minutes passed. More people gathered. More conversations. More whispers. And every time Adrian spoke, he made it worse. She's very low maintenance. She doesn't go out. She doesn't complain. Each sentence sounded normal, but the tone, the delivery, the intention was clear. He wasn't praising her. He was reducing her. That changed everything, because people began to follow his lead. A woman stepped forward, elegant, confident, sharp eyes. Well, that must be convenient. A pause. Then she smiled, but also boring. More laughter. Mira tilted her head slightly. Not confused. Not lost. Listening. Processing. Understanding. The phone kept ringing. Not literally, but emotionally. Every word felt like a call, a signal, a warning. And still, she said nothing. That was her mistake. Or maybe that was her strength. Adrian picked up a glass of wine, swirled it slowly, then looked directly at Mira. Why don't you say something? The room quieted slightly. Attention shifted. Pressure built. Mira smiled softly. What would you like me to say? Adrian smirked. Anything. Then, he leaned closer. Or is that too difficult? A few people chuckled again, but this time, it felt heavier, more intentional. But wait, it gets worse. Adrian turned to the crowd. You know, she wasn't always like this. Silence.
Curiosity.
Attention. Mira's expression didn't change, but her breathing slowed, just a little. She used to be normal. That word
Hung in the air, heavy.
sharp. And then one day, he paused, took a sip. Everything went dark. A few people exchanged looks, some uncomfortable, some intrigued. Mira's hand moved slightly, searching, not for support, but for control. Funny thing is, Adrian continued, they said it was an accident. But she didn't know.
This was not a random statement.
This was a hint. A dangerous one. Mira's head tilted slightly again. That word, accident, echoed in her mind. Because something about it never felt right. But she didn't know why it never felt right. The woman from earlier stepped closer again. So sad. She looked directly at Mira. I can't imagine living like that. Mira smiled.
Soft. Calm.
Controlled. You'd be surprised what people can live through. That line shifted something. A brief silence. Adrian noticed it, and for a split second, his expression changed. Just slightly. Because something about her tone felt different. But he ignored it. That was the moment everything started falling apart. Not visibly, not loudly, but internally, quietly. Because for the first time, Mira wasn't just listening. She was remembering. The room was still alive with noise. But for Mira, everything slowed down. Voices faded. Laughter blurred. Even the music felt distant. Because her mind was somewhere else. Back to that night. But she didn't know
What really happened that night?
all she remembered was pain, confusion, darkness. And Adrian's voice. It's going to be okay. A promise that never felt real. She saw something, not with her eyes, but with her memory. Fragments, broken pieces, unfinished moments.
A sound. A door.
A sudden impact. Then, silence. She couldn't explain. Mira's fingers tightened slightly again, but this time, she didn't relax them. Because something was changing. And then, she heard it. Not in the room, but inside her memory. A second voice. Silence. Her breathing paused. Because that voice was not hers.
And it wasn't a doctor.
It was Adrian. But different. Colder. You weren't supposed to be there. The words echoed. Mira's lips parted slightly. Not in shock, but in realization. But wait, that memory was never supposed to come back. She had buried it.
Deep. Hidden.
Locked away. Because it didn't make sense. Until now. Back in the present. Adrian was still talking. Still smiling. Still performing. But something felt off. Because Mira was no longer reacting the same way. She wasn't just standing there anymore. She was present. What happened next shifted everything. Mira turned slightly toward Adrian, her expression calm, but her voice
Different.
Adrian. He paused, just for a second. Yes. Mira tilted her head. Do you remember that night? A simple question. But it hit like a trigger. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. Barely noticeable. What night? Mira smiled.
Soft.
But this time, there was something behind it. The night, everything changed. Silence. The air shifted. People nearby slowed their conversations, not fully stopping,
But sensing something.
but she didn't know how close she was to the truth. Adrian chuckled lightly. Why bring that up now? Mira didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, still, focused, because for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the silence. She was using it. That changed everything, because she finally said, something about it doesn't feel right. A pause. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? Mira's fingers brushed lightly against the edge of the table, grounding herself. I don't remember everything. Another pause. But I remember enough. The tension was rising. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. And then, Mira added quietly, I remember your voice. Silence. Real silence this time. No laughter. No music. No movement. Just tension. Adrian's expression froze for a split second. What are you trying to say? Mira didn't answer directly, because she wasn't fully sure yet. But she felt it. And sometimes, feeling is enough. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because somewhere, deep inside her memory, was something else. Something darker. Something she hadn't reached yet. And when she did, everything would change. We're entering the most intense phase now. This is where everything breaks open. Tension, shock, emotional explosion. I'll keep the pacing tight, the emotions heavy, and the reveals controlled. The silence didn't last long. It never does. Because people are uncomfortable with tension. They fill it. They escape it. They pretend it didn't happen. Laughter slowly returned. Music picked up again. Conversations resumed. But something had changed. Adrian could feel it, even if no one else could. Mira was no longer just standing beside him. She was confronting something. Here's where everything changed. Adrian leaned closer to her.
His voice low.
Controlled. Not here. It sounded like a warning, not concern. But Mira didn't move. What happened next was not part of his plan. She turned slightly toward him, still calm, still soft. But her words were sharper now. Then where? That question, simple as it was, held weight. Adrian's expression hardened. You're tired, he said quickly. We'll talk at home. A deflection. But Mira shook her head slightly.
No.
That one word shifted everything. Because Mira never said no. But she didn't know how powerful that moment was. Around them, people were watching. Not openly,
But subtly.
curiously. Because tension like that is hard to ignore. Adrian straightened his posture, trying to regain control. You're making a scene? Mira smiled faintly. No, she said softly. You did that already. A few nearby guests froze. That line.
Cut deep.
That changed everything. Adrian's jaw tightened. For the first time that night, he wasn't in control. And he didn't like it. Enough, he said firmly. But Mira continued. Why did you say it was an accident? The question landed heavily. Because now, it wasn't just tension. It was exposure. But wait, this wasn't even the real confrontation yet. Adrian let out a short laugh. Forced. Cold. Because it was. Mira tilted her head slightly. Then why do I remember you saying? She paused. I wasn't supposed to be there? Silence. Real silence again. This time, it spread wider. More people noticed. More people listened. Adrian's eyes darkened. You're confused. Mira nodded slowly. Yes, I was. A pause. But I'm not anymore. That line hit harder than anything before it. What happened next started to break the illusion. Adrian stepped closer. Too close. His voice dropped even lower. You don't know what you're talking about. But Mira didn't step back. Because something inside her was no longer afraid. Then tell me. A challenge. Soft voice. Strong intent. That contrast made it even more powerful. Tell me what really happened that night. Adrian stayed silent. And that silence said everything. But wait. Something else was about to enter the picture. A voice came from behind. Adrian. He froze. Just slightly. Because he recognized that voice. A woman stepped forward. Elegant. Confident. Familiar. Too familiar. Mira turned slightly. Listening. And then the woman spoke again. We need to talk. Her tone was not casual. It was urgent and uncomfortable. Mira's expression didn't change, but inside, something clicked. Because that voice felt connected to something.
To that night.
But she didn't know
how deep that connection was.
Adrian exhaled slowly. Not now. The woman glanced at Mira, then back at him. It can't wait. Tension, pressure, eyes watching. Everything was building. And Adrian was losing control. What happened next, no one was prepared for. Mira spoke again, quiet, measured. Who is she? Simple question. Dangerous timing. Adrian didn't answer. The woman did. She paused. Then said it. Someone he didn't tell you about.
Shock.
Subtle, but real. Mira's fingers tightened again. But she didn't react. Not the way people expected. She didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't panic. She just stood there.
Processing.
Understanding. Because deep down, she already knew. What happened next was the beginning of the end. Everything slowed down again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was clarity. Painful, sharp, unavoidable clarity. Mira stood still. Between Adrian and the truth. But she didn't know how much it was about to hurt. The woman stepped closer. Her voice softer now. He was going to tell you. Adrian turned sharply. Stop. But it was too late. Because once truth starts coming out, it doesn't stop. That changed everything. Mira tilted her head slightly. Tell me what? The woman hesitated. But then, she said it. We have a child. Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable, unavoidable. A few people gasped quietly. But Mira didn't react.
Not yet.
Because her mind was still catching up. But wait, that wasn't even the full truth. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. Frustrated. Cornered. This is not how this was supposed to happen. Mira's lips parted slightly. Supposed to? That word triggered something. Because suddenly, everything connected. The distance, the coldness, the control. And that night, what happened next was the final piece. Mira took a slow breath. Was I in your way? The question, quiet, but devastating. Adrian didn't answer. And that silence was the answer. But she didn't know.
There was still one more truth left.
Mira continued. That night, she paused. I wasn't supposed to be there, right? Adrian closed his eyes briefly. Because he knew he couldn't avoid it anymore.
No.
The word dropped like a weight. Mira nodded slowly. And the accident? She paused again. Wasn't really an accident. Silence. Adrian didn't speak.
He didn't deny it.
He didn't defend himself. because there was nothing left to say. That call she ignored. No, not a phone call. A moment, a feeling, a truth. She ignored it back then. But now, she couldn't. Was her last chance. Mira's voice trembled slightly. Not from weakness. From realization. You knew I was there. A tear rolled down her cheek. And you didn't stop it. That was it. The full truth. No more confusion. No more guessing. Just reality.
Raw.
Painful. Final. Adrian finally spoke. I didn't think. Exactly. Mira cut him off. You didn't think. That line was not loud, but it carried everything. All the pain, all the betrayal, all the years. And in that moment, everything broke. Not loudly, but completely. Mira stepped back slightly. Not because she was weak, but because she was done. Done hoping, done trusting, done waiting. What happened next was not revenge. It was something deeper. Something heavier. Mira turned her face slightly away. I stayed, she said softly. I defended you. Another tear fell. I loved you. Silence. Adrian didn't move. Because for the first time, he felt it. Loss. Real loss. And there was nothing he could do about it. And in that moment, everything changed forever. We're closing this with emotional weight, slow pacing, and lasting impact. This is where the story breathes and stays in the viewer's mind. No one spoke. Not immediately, because some moments are too heavy for words. The music had stopped. Not officially, but no one was listening anymore. All eyes were on them. Adrian, Mira, and the truth that had just shattered everything. But she didn't know. This wasn't just the end of a moment. It was the end of a life she once believed in. Mira stood still, her breathing soft, controlled, but different now. Not the same woman who walked into that room. Something inside her had shifted. Not anger, not revenge. Clarity. Pure, painful clarity. What happened next was quieter than anyone expected. Mira reached for the edge of the table beside her, not because she needed support, but because she was grounding herself. Feeling something real, something steady, something that wouldn't lie to her. Adrian took a step forward. Slow, careful. Mira? Her name sounded different now. Not cold, not distant. Almost human. But it was too late. Because sometimes, realization comes after damage. And by then, it no longer matters. Mira didn't turn to him. Not immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. I understand now. Simple words. But they carried everything. Adrian swallowed. No, you don't. I do. She cut him off gently. No anger, no shouting. Just truth. You didn't lose me tonight. A pause. You lost me a long time ago. Silence. That line echoed deeper than anything else. Because it wasn't dramatic. It was real. But wait, there was something even heavier coming. Mira slowly turned her face toward him. And I think, she continued softly. You knew that. Adrian didn't respond. Because he did. He knew. From the moment he chose silence over truth. From the moment he chose power over her. From the moment he let that night happen without stopping it. That changed everything. Because now, it wasn't just about what he did. It was about what he allowed. And that kind of guilt doesn't go away. Mira took a small step back. Then another. Creating distance. Not just physically, but emotionally. Finally, the woman who had endured everything was letting go. What happened next was not loud, but it was final. Mira spoke one last time. I hope. A pause. You remember this moment. Adrian's eyes softened. Because for the first time, he wasn't thinking like a boss. He was thinking like a man who had lost something real. I hope, Mira continued, you remember what it felt like. Her voice trembled slightly. To lose someone who truly loved you. Silence. Heavy.
Permanent.
And then, she turned. No hesitation. No looking back. Just walking away. Step by step.
Calm. Steady. Free.
But she didn't know that this moment would stay with Adrian forever. Because for the first time, he didn't feel powerful.
He felt empty.
What happened next was something no one in that room expected. Adrian didn't stop her. He didn't call her name. He didn't chase her. Because deep down, he knew he had no right to. And that realization was heavier than anything else. The room slowly came back to life. Whispers, movement, shock. But Adrian didn't move. He just stood there. Still. Staring at the space she left behind. Because sometimes, the absence of someone is louder than their presence ever was. That changed everything. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. The mansion was still there. The power was still there. The wealth, unchanged. But something was missing. Not something.
Someone.
Mira. And with her went the only part of Adrian's life that was real. He tried to distract himself.
Work.
Meetings. Control. But it didn't work. Because silence has a way of bringing truth back. Over and over again. Every room reminded him of her. The quiet mornings. The untouched tea. The empty spaces. And that night. That moment. Her voice. You lost me a long time ago. It echoed. Relentless. Unforgiving. But the lesson stayed. Because now, Adrian understood something he never cared about before. Some losses cannot be fixed. Some mistakes
do not get a second chance.
And some people, once they're gone, are gone forever. Sometimes, one moment changes everything. One decision. One silence. One truth ignored. And by the time you realize it, it's already too late. What would you have done if you were Mira?